You're listening to Medicinal Minutes with Meagan Mozingo. This is the Medicinal Minute with Meagan Mozingo, and today I have a friend, a mentor, business mentor, author, inner healer, painter. Alice, you have done so many cool things. So it's an honor to talk to you today. And could you tell us just a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Sure. It's my delight to be here. Thank you so much. I am kind of a serial entrepreneur. And I kind of warn people that, probably it's better to do as I say, not as I do, because it gets a little crazy. But I'm a fine artist. I'm also a graphic designer and do work a lot in the indie book world, which I'm also an independent author. I've published more than 30 books of different sorts. So that's been a fun adventure. And then I have business coaching. I'm also the creative director of Indie Author Magazine and involved in several things over there, and have my own inner healing practice where I help people clear the blocks that are keeping them from becoming everything that God's created and called them to be. So part of, I think, kind of it sounds like I do a lot of different things, and I do, but the kind of the unifying factor of everything that I've done throughout my life, including my degree, which is occupational therapy, is that I help people achieve their goals through whatever kind of medium that I'm working in at the moment. Then that is my purpose and my, I guess, calling and gifting through those things. So even through my artwork, that's my intention when I'm creating, is to bring peace to the atmosphere in order that people can hear the voice of the Spirit. They can then be released to do everything that God's created them to do. So that's kind of
Yeah, that's great. And that's really cool that you even said the word released to do the voice of the Holy Spirit. And if you're blocked, we're not going to have a release, right? So
right,
that's
right.
really there's been a thread, guys. If you've been listening for any amount of time, there's a thread of having your spirit come forward, being released back to you to become more whole with our triune being of spirit, soul, and body. So Alice, with inner healing, that makes room for our spirit to come forward. How have you seen people reconnect to their spirit as they move past blockages? And maybe even what would a block look like to people who are listening?
Well, and kind of we've heard a lot of the glass ceiling, and they've talked about it historically in reference to women in the workplace that they can't progress past. We all have our own kind of glass ceilings where through our just kind of like our own giftings, our own life experiences, whatever, we can go so far, but then we hit something and we can't go any further. And you can try and go around it, or you can, and I can't remember off the top of my head what I read a book, and I'm like, oh my word, that's such a great picture. I can't remember the phrase that he used, but it's also where you only feel like you're allowed so much happiness, so much joy, so much success. So a lot of the midlife crisis that they talk about that men, and now women more so in the business realm, go through, where they reach a certain level of success and then their life falls apart. And part of that is because they have this block, they have this mental belief that up to here is only where I'm okay. I can't go beyond that. So if I go beyond that in business, then I have to pull myself back down under that level. And it can also be kind of like another picture of, as you're going along your journey, and it's something that trips you up, like literally a block in your path that trips you up, no matter what happens to you or how you try and go around it. It keeps showing up in the same place. So, and that it can be mental, emotional, it can be physical, it can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. So, I mean, at the heart, it's all the enemy, but.
Right. And I think this is going to ruffle people's feathers. So brace yourselves.
Yeah.
The spirit of religion And like westernized Christianity really puts a ton of blocks from our spirit being able to come forward, because we've been conditioned to believe that we're supposed to only stand after we have our armor on. We're not supposed to actually use our armor, like actually in war. You just stand there and like, okay, now you've stood for forever. And like, that's not effective in a spirit forward life at all. Like we have to be engaged with our spirit.
Yeah. And depending on your religious tradition, that looks different in different ways. I didn't grow up in a charismatic type environment. We definitely believed in the holistic. It wasn't cessationist, but it's like, most of that stuff happened in China or Africa, right? Not so much here. So, you had those kinds of, you work hard and you kind of do for yourself. When I kind of discovered more of the charismatic thing, there's a lot of, you just believe it and then it happens for you. And I'm like, okay, both are true and both are false at the same time. We need to have faith. We need to believe that God will do the miraculous, that he will do. He has healing for us. He has breakthrough for us. He has all of these great things. And I've seen him do amazing things, amazing and miraculous things. But I've also seen where he gives me an idea or something to walk out that creates the breakthrough. Yes. He gives me, I need to participate in that. I am not just okay, I'm here, right. I have to be an active participant, not just a receiver of, and so I think in both cases you have, and I find that so much in Christendom, that we tend to go from one extreme to the other, and the truth is in the middle somewhere, where we need, it's both and. We need like both the works.
Like a pendulum swing sort of thing where, And I think and I
don't think the enemy cares which direction we swing, so long as we never stay here in the middle. Right. Because as if we never get the truth, the fullness of the truth, then we're never going to get past our blocks. We're never going to be able to become and to do and to be everything that we were created to be. Yeah. So, he really, I think, and for Christians especially, I think he tends to get us more in religious ways than necessarily sin. So, our idolatry isn't going to look like, a full-on pagan altar in the living room. It's going to look like, well, I can't do this until I, or my prayers, like God has to do this for me if I do this. Right. It gets into that more manipulative prayer and heart posture. So,
like entitlement Christianity of, well, I expect God to be my genie in a bottle and just kind of, if I pray this prayer, then God's going to manifest my will for me.
Yeah.
That's not Christianity. Not a relationship with Jesus. That's actually called witchcraft. So, okay. So have you seen in your inner healing practice, what has it been like when you see someone reconcile their spirit back to themselves after not having had access to their spirit, after being blocked for so long? What does that look like in your practice?
It can look like so many different things, but I think kind of most commonly, and I think you kind of tend to attract people who are similar to you, and so I tend to work with a lot of people who go into business for some odd reason. So, or artists, I've got kind of those, but so what that looks like very commonly for my clients is that they, it's like they're kind of going along, and oftentimes they're just like, I just don't know what I want to do. They know that they're not where they want to be, but they don't even know what that looks like anymore, because they have either because of trauma, lies that they've believed, that dream inside their heart is wrong and is not of God. And so when we uncover the lies, we break those off, then they're like, oh, I've always wanted to do this, and it's like they're almost at first kind of afraid to even say it. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's where we're not meant to all be the same. So God has immense creativity and immense diversity of plans for our lives. So, you know, just because it doesn't look like what your parents did or everybody in your world doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times that's what the enemy does is he's like, well, you can't do that because no one's ever done it before. You don't know anybody that's done it that way. It's like, well, you know, there was a first time for everything.
Bless the trailblazers. I bless them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he hides, I think, and the enemy, I'm convinced, and this is kind of one of those theological conundrums that I wrestle with, because I don't believe that he can read our thoughts. He's not omniscient. He's not omnipresent. He is a finite created being like we are, you know, of a different sort, obviously, but he is not like an opposite of God, because he was created by God. So he has distinct limitations. But I'm convinced that he knows, either from studying humanity for, you know, all these millennia, or by some other the reason, that he kind of knows what the blessings or the giftings on our bloodlines are. Because he seems to know far more than we do what we were gifted and created to be. So much so that oftentimes, if there's an area of your life that has seen a significant amount of attack, most likely that's because that's what God wants you to do. And the enemy, above all else, does not want you to do that thing. You can do whatever else you want, just don't do that thing.
Because that would make for a very, very dangerous son or daughter of the Most High God. And that would be destructive.
Absolutely.
That's what you're supposed to do, friends.
Yeah.
Be destructive.
Yeah, because we were created to take dominion. We were created to, you know, to seize ground. There's so much language that we've, I think, overly poeticized, and especially in Western Christendom, because we've had it very easy, you know, over the last 100 years or so. But there's a lot of warlike, very violent language when it talks about being a Christian and walking through life and taking back ground. And so if you actually read it, it's fairly violent.
It's there. Yeah.
It's there. And it's not violent in like the brutal, and I think that's part of it too, because we've equated violence with negativity always, as opposed to, we don't have the right language. I think we've lost the distinction in our language.
I think there's also an element of like victim mentality that our culture has. And so when we say the word dominion, because of the woundedness in our life, if we have ever been domineered by someone in a predatory way, then that's the only thing that we think of when it comes to dominion. Yeah. When really the Lord allows us to have authorized authority and power to bring in his goodness. And if we believe that God is all good, then the dominion that we bring in the redemption of the land, to the redemption to the land that we bring through his dominion, is going to end up being good, because the source is good.
It brings freedom. It brings all good things. It doesn't bring bondage. And I think that's the, you know, like right now, just in this cultural moment, there's a lot of talk about being the oppressor versus the oppressed. And that is a very godless system, that there always has to be an oppressor. There always has to be an oppressed. That isn't God at all. So that he came to set us free. So that freedom is freedom. You are not oppressed, nor are you oppressing anyone else. Yeah. So that can even be, that mindset can even just be a huge block to your spirit coming forward and being big, to be dangerous and to go and do things that the Lord has called you to do. So with that, you have an entire book on anxiety. And lots of people, regardless of their belief system, struggle with anxiety. Yeah. So that's a huge block to spirit forward living.
what are the physical manifestations of that? And I mean, in my own practice with herbs, we use nervines quite frequently to calm the nervous system. How have you seen that manifest in a physical issue because it's an emotional and energy and motion kind of thing that's landing in the body?
Mm-hmm. A lot of times I'll see people who have anxiety attacks. A lot of times they have sought medical healing or herbal healing or whatever. So I tend to get people that are like, I have tried everything else and I'm still, and what happens a lot of times with any kind of traumatic thing, and anxiety definitely can in and of itself, it can result from trauma, but it also can be very traumatic. If you are just like kind of the classic anxiety attack, where, you know, your heart's racing and you're sweating and you're just like in panic and you're just looking everywhere for the threat and looking for a way out. And you just, you know, you're all your senses are heightened because you are on high alert because there is some form of imminent danger, which most of the time in today's world that it isn't a true danger. But for whatever reason, something has resonated, it's triggered something within us that reminds us of some kind of situation. It can also be generational, but that's kind of a whole other realm. So, but I work a lot with the body's energetic system. And this is where it gets a little, again, I need to come up with my own vocabulary. So when I talk about the energy work that I do is not woo-woo energy. The meridian system within the body works much like our nervous system. It's a subtler form of energy. And that seems to be where all of kind of our emotional content resides, and it can get stuck. So a lot of times what happens with anxiety and other issues, there is something that's stuck there. And because we've not worked through it, we've not processed it, it hasn't been healed, then it's just like a raw bruise. So just like if you get a bruise, then most of the time it doesn't hurt until you bump it. And then you're like, that's a trigger, but we call it in my world, a trigger. And that's when you are overreacting to a present circumstance because you've got a deeper wound that just got triggered. So you just hit that deeper bruise. And so you're responding to today as well as back then. So when you're able to release that inner trauma, then you're able to more accurately assess your current situation. You are now responding. You're not just reacting, you're responding to what's really around. So I've had, and it's kind of interesting, inner healing tends to be one of those things where it can so completely disappear for you that you have to try and remember what it was like before. So it's just kind of like this whole thing. So I have to remember to ask people, so have you done this? Oh, no. You know what? Just the other day, I talked to whoever and they normally, trigger me, or I'm normally really stressed. Didn't bother me a bit. I was fine,
So I love that you mentioned that, because so many times people don't even become friends with other people because they feel triggered, and whatever's manifest. Let's say someone's living in their God-given design, but another person isn't. And there's still an insecurity, and they're still in the blocked voice, and they're still framing their entire worldview of that person's big, therefore I'm displaced now, I'm small, trigger. Yeah. When we move past those blocks and realize there is more than enough space at Abba's table for everyone to function and flow in their own design, there's so much mercy and there's so much kindness there. Yeah. And those triggers, like you were mentioning, knowing what the trigger is, and then going back into that space where it would have, you would have just lost it. And like, whatever your defense mechanism is to protect, when that protector portion isn't up anymore and you're able to sit in that space and be
just be
who you are, that's healing and that's redemptive. And a lot of times people need to write it down because the healing comes. And like you were saying, it's like, oh yeah, that used to be me, but we're now moving from glory to glory and from newness to newness. It's like being washed by the water of the word, and like the healing goes deep there.
Yeah. And I think we're able to then differentiate because so I think getting triggered can look and feel the same regardless of whether or not it's a true threat or not. So sometimes we're triggered by people like you were talking about who are not meaning us harm, they're meaning us good, or they're completely oblivious to us entirely.
Right.
They're just living their life,
Yeah.
And we're threatened by something within them, which, sometimes again can be a cue that you might want to see what it is about them that's triggering you, because that may be a clue to your design. Because oftentimes people attack other people the most who are walking in freedom. The people they attack the people walking in freedom because they should be and they're not.
Oh, that's so good.
So you tend to be like, you're like, well, if I can't, you can't.
Right.
And it's like, no, you need to flip that. If they can, you can.
Yeah.
Walk in freedom. But there are some people who are not safe and they're not good. So being able to be healed from the trigger to say, okay, that's an unhealthy person. So, I can bless them and I can just limit, and I can take their words and recognize that they're a wounded person, but that doesn't reflect on me.
Yeah. And that takes maturity in your healing to separate. Okay, this is their playing field and this isn't going to come into my realm or okay. So body meridians and tapping, you taught me this more in depth, and I was slightly familiar with it, but I wasn't as familiar with it when I first started working with you as I am now. Can you tell us a little about that and how you work that into not just your inner healing practice, but even your business? Because if you are a business owner, you know that there are mental pathways and mental blocks. Tapping can super help. So tell us about that.
Absolutely. So there are believed to be 12 main meridians, and they're associated with organs, although they're not specific just to that organ. And they are, if you've ever seen like an image of the nervous system and in the body, that there's kind of like all this, it's a little map, and the energy flows in this map. For the meridian system, for the nervous system, it goes like from your brain to your spine and then out. In the meridian system, it's more circular, and each of the meridians are also circular, and they believe that they each that your body is designed for the energy to flow through all 12 of those meridians 2 hours at a time throughout the day. So if you have, and again, when I'm talking energy, I mean literal energy. Just like the electricity that's in your walls, that's, turn the light on for you. It's a physical, literal energy. So when you have, and there are different emotions tied to, and kind of when I first learned about it, I learned about the meridian system in OT school. It was just briefly mentioned, because OT doesn't address that specifically. But I was like, okay, that sounds really kind of creepy. And then when I learned about the technique that I do, I'm like, oh. And I noticed that there were a lot of like the biblical, when the Bible talks about some of the emotions, like fear being tied to the kidneys and that kind of thing. That is actually, that's the ancient Chinese or whoever else had to, yes, that is on the meridian system. It's tied to that. So it's kind of like a confirming kind of thing. But you can get negative emotions stuck in that system, and it's just like a block. So if you picture kind of like water flowing, just because that's an easier picture to visualize, and it's supposed to be going down a riverbed, but you put a dam up there, then it's not going to let as much water flowing through. So all of this pressure is going to build up back behind there until, it can break the dam or whatever, or it's keeping you from just living your life to the full. So I use primarily circuitry and intention. There's also tapping, like you mentioned. There's several different ways of kind of getting that energy, releasing the negative energy so that all of the energy can flow like God designed it to you in your body. And then you can kind of carry on and do whatever it is he's created you to do. So,
yeah. And it's interesting that you even brought up TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, which is herbalism, because those modalities where emotions are stored in the body, they can have like a specific energetic to them, like a dryness or a hot, cold, damp. All of that is how a lot of herbalists address issues within the body, because some of those emotions are creating a physical manifestation of that blocked emotion. So like bladder issues, kidneys, fear, it goes back to, I spoke about it on a different podcast, of fear, shame, control. If someone has incontinence, they're unable to control something. So control is manifesting at some point. If they're afraid and then they do not release things that should be released, that can show up as well in a physiological way. And so the reason why this entire podcast is about spirit forward living is because healing in the physical will only get so far before it becomes blocked. And then there has to be something deeper, because we are a triune being and we need our soul to be restored, which is what the Lord tells us he's going to do. He will restore our soul, but we have to also bless our soul and bless our spirit to be who they were created to be as well. So that was really interesting and helpful information about the meridians.
And there's a lot of times people will come to me, and of course I can't say that I can fix X, Y, or Z physical thing with what I do. That hasn't, it's not been tested. It hasn't been, gone through all the science stuff to be actually shown to be, like, yes, this will do this, just like they do the trials for penicillin or whatever, they know it does what it says on the tin. So those tests haven't been done. But I have noticed repeatedly throughout my practice, and this is what I tell people, that oftentimes if you have a physical issue and you have tried everything, then if you can, oftentimes, and not always, oftentimes there is some emotional or spiritual component that is blocking what you're doing in the natural realm. So if you address that, then you're good to go. And it resolves very quickly and easily. I've had people that with chronic and generational, like a family bloodline of high blood pressure, they've had a couple sessions, and it can be as quick as one session. I can't ever guarantee, because I don't ever know. I always want, I want a spiritual x-ray. Right. I can scan and say, okay, right. It's going to be 3 sessions because we need to do this, this, and this. And then,
right.
I haven't invented that yet. But I had one girl, she had a whole family history of high blood pressure. She was on medication, had a session with me. That's exactly where the session went to. So, and she sent me a picture of her normal blood pressure reading an hour later.
Amazing.
So, yeah, it's, I always recommend then you go back and talk to your doctor, which, I don't envy that conversation, but.
Sure. So it's interesting that you even mentioned that sometimes if you're not getting anywhere with the modality that you've been trying, especially for physical healing, typically in my practice, we get the cast offs of I've tried everything. I've tried everything in allopathic medicine. What can you do for me? And first and foremost, we got to address some stuff that's going on in the spirit first. And so like in my practice, we're not for everyone. Like we're literally not for everyone. And some of what we do might be different in function, but we have to bring honor to our entire being, not just a portion of our being, or we're still going to remain divided.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your art, your prophetic art business. I just love this because I used to paint a long time ago. I don't know if I want to call myself an artist, more like a dabbler, but I really do love painting. So with your prophetic art business, obviously this all comes from your spirit and it's led by Holy Spirit to do these prophetic artworks. Can you tell us what that looks like, how that looks like for you in your prophetic art business?
Sure. From my experience, I seem to do it a lot different, kind of backwards from a lot of people. I don't ever, and this is kind of semi-terrifying, that when I'm painting at an event, or if I'm doing a piece for someone, a personal prophetic piece, I shouldn't say I don't ever. There have been I think twice in my career where I had a picture and then I painted that thing. But, the vast percentage of the time I have zero idea. I'm standing there, in front of a group of people with a blank board and paints. And I just get started. And for me, painting was one of the ways where God spoke to me the clearest. When I was still kind of in my left brain. I have a degrees in science, so I spent a lot of my life on my left brain. So then I kind of swung to the right, and I always mess up all of those left brain, right brain things. But artwork was, and the way I paint is I am literally I'm playing with the paint, and I'm just going to see what it wants to be when it grows up. I've taken all the art classes, and for me, I was always, and I've read something where you're always frustrated because it looks like you painted it. And that is kind of the point of artwork, is that it's your painting.
Your essence is in there.
Yeah. So, but it just never looked, when I had something in mind, it never looked like that thing. So I just found great freedom in just playing with the paint and seeing. And through that process, I started to recognize the voice of the Lord in that he would speak to me during those times where it's not, I wouldn't say that I'm in a trance, or I'm not, I'm fully in touch with reality. I'm not, anything, it's not anything super spiritual or woo, but I'm just not intentionally thinking about anything in particular. And so those little, that little whispery voice of the Lord can flit across. And I started to learn to pay attention to that. So, and to me, if you can write legibly, you can draw, you can paint, if you choose to devote the time to do that, then you can. That's a skill. It isn't necessarily, it's the same thing with hearing the Lord. That isn't anything. I am, of course, special and unique, as we all are. We're all individual and unique, but that ability to hear the Lord is not unique to me. It may look different in my life because I'm a unique individual, if that makes sense. But that doesn't mean that I'm better or more spiritual or whatever.
Sure. A practical way to kind of sum that up is, as a mom, the way I interact with my oldest, he's going to receive my words completely different than my daughter will. Yeah. And I even have a little baby, and he receives what I say and do to him at this stage in life completely different than my other two kids right now.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing with Holy Spirit speaking to people.
Yeah.
You're going to receive from the Holy Spirit in the way that God designed you to receive from the Holy Spirit. That might be with art. I know for a fact, my husband, it is not like that. Yeah. He's receiving from the Lord when he's driving really, really fast.
Yeah.
On a track. I'm like, go for it, babe.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of getting back to what we were saying before. Don't let anybody else's experience make you feel less than. If that's something that's calling to you, then find out how you can tap into that. I am an explorer. I'm not very risk averse within limits. I like to think things through, but then I'll just jump in and do stuff. So I am somewhat fearless in a lot of ways. So for me, like if something within my story is resonating with you, then know that I have walked before you to show you that this is a way that this can happen.
Yeah.
And so eventually things always in my artwork, and just like in our lives, sometimes I will get to a point in my artwork where I'm like, this is the worst thing I have ever done. It is horrible. I hate it. And I'm like, and it's again, if I'm in front of other people, it's even more terrifying. But if I push through that and I continue, those have become my favorite pieces. And I don't know what it is about that process that mimics so much of our life experiences, where you have to go through the dark night to get to the morning.
Yeah.
I have one piece in particular where I actually put on my science hat and did kind of like an informal survey study, where one of the things that I heard when I was painting that was, you just need to ask. You need to ask me for what you want. I have it for you. And it's a picture of an angel holding things. And I received a breakthrough through that painting, and many other people did as well. And so my experiment was, if the print would also carry that same anointing, because obviously there's only one original, and it did. So everyone, I think nearly everybody that I'd have to go back and look at the exact stats, but I think everybody that I heard back from, which it wasn't, hundreds and hundreds of people. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt, but they all received breakthrough in at least one area of their life that they were wanting to. And sometimes it was several.
That's an impact. That's just an impact of someone living from their design, like Abba given design, and this is such a cool thing, because when we start to honor other believers for being who they were designed to be within the ramifications that God has ordained for them, we're going to see much more breakthrough, much more healing, much more restoration, just because you're doing you with Jesus, and it's so cool because the healing just continues to flow forth. It's really awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's part of why that's my goal in life, is to see everybody become who God created them to be, because it's partly altruistic. I love to see people just, receiving that joy of, oh, great, I can do this. Like, this is me. This is really who I was designed to be. And then part of it's selfishness, because the more people that we have who are operating out of their spirit, who are doing the thing that God created them to do, being the person that they were created to be, the easier life is going to be for all of us.
Yeah.
There is that cumulative breakthrough that happens when you're all moving forward. And I think partly, like we talked about earlier, part of it is because we're no longer fighting with each other. We can work in communion and cooperation with each other, honoring each other's gifts for the place that they have in the world. So, but
yeah, that's really cool. You also mentioned just a second ago about some of the paintings that you thought were going to be terrible ended up being the best ones that you like some of your favorites, because there was productive pain and you pushed through that. And it's so interesting, because there are places in physical healing where there is a productive pain that has to take place. In our soul, there's productive pain that has to take place with acknowledging triggers and knowing, okay, what is this? And then asking Jesus to come and help. And then even in the spirit realm, when there's spiritual blocks, there's productive pain. And when we push through that, it becomes our playground after the pain was there.
And I would say, just to the people who aren't familiar with that, or that thought terrifies them, I have found that when we say productive pain, that pain is far less than the pain of staying where you are.
Yeah.
So is it difficult? Does it require effort? Do you have to face things that you probably don't want to face? Yes. Is it worse than where you are? No, it is far better. It is far better. And that's one of the, for me, the healing process should not be more triggering than than before. Like you're doing it wrong. if you're feeling worse, then but will it require effort? Will it require participation? Yeah, but that's a productive pain. Like Meagan said, that's a good kind of like a good stretch. If you've been sitting for a while and you stretch and you can feel that tension, you can feel that, ooh, I haven't moved in a while. The older I get, the more that becomes a problem.
The more kids I have, the more that becomes a problem.
Yeah. So, but it's that good, that it's a good feeling too. Yeah. So, I don't know.
It's productive. It's productive.
And once you're through it, it's just it's fantastic. Not that you don't ever have other things. I think, that's the tension of being, essentially spirit beings in earth suits. As I've heard some people call it, until the earth is restored in whatever way that looks like, and how, while it's still a sinful place, we're going to have troubles. I mean, the Bible's very clear about that. We're not guaranteed just all roses and sweet music, but
Pollyanna worldview. A Pollyanna worldview.
Right.
Yeah.
But it can all be productive. It can all be because God has promised that he uses all things for our good.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the errors that people also get into when they say that, oh, well, God did this so that you could grow. No, God never did anything bad to you so that you could grow. He is so brilliant at using the things that the enemy has done against you so that you can grow and become a better person and learn things about him in that darkness that you couldn't learn in the light, or wouldn't, I don't know. That he's so good at it that it almost looks intentional, but it wasn't. That wasn't ever his intention, for you to experience trauma, for you to experience horrible abuse and all kinds of stuff like that. That wasn't ever God. But can he use it, and can he create you to be just a great and shining example of freedom to other people so that you can take revenge on the enemy? He absolutely can do that.
And that it goes back to the dominion piece, because if they've coerced and stolen and co-opted against the creator who has his copyright on our destinies, moving through that pain and moving into God's goodness and just some of the callings that he has, the goodness of God in your life, moving towards that is massive, massive justice and a big punch in the face to the enemy, because, he was trying to co-op it and knock you out.
And the more we do that, the more we show others that it's possible. So, kind of, again, going back to what we've said several times, then it becomes kind of like the snowballing avalanche of healing and destinies fulfilled, because you can be an example that, I made it through. I know how. Yeah. And no two people's paths are going to look exactly the same, but knowing that it's possible is, I think, 90% of the journey. So, as just being willing to take that first step and having hope that there is much better for you out there.
So with this whole spirit forward living theme that we've been talking about, everything is coming from the spirit realm down through the lens of expansion of God's kingdom. You have an entire course and an entire brand new book, which is really cool, which released last week. But when this podcast releases, it's going to be months from now. So,
we should have all the tech bugs worked out.
all tech bugs. It's really interesting because you have partnered with Seneca Sherman, and y'all's course has been phenomenal. And I haven't read your book. I bought it because it hasn't mailed to me yet. But I know that the book is going to be just as awesome. Could you tell us how these supernatural strategies work to progress us forward, specifically in business at this point? Because there are a lot of business owners that listen here in this realm.
Right. Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So kind of the entire premise of what Seneca and I are doing is, and it just flows exactly with what we've been talking about. If God created you to do business, then he has something specific in mind for you and for your business. So in kind of getting back to a lot of our religious blocks say that there is this division of business and, like the only holy callings are to become a pastor, priest, or whatever your tradition calls the spiritual leaders, or an evangelist, and that's pretty much it. So a business person isn't, and we believe that you can be called to be a business person, and that is as equal a calling as anything else, as being a pastor, as being an evangelist. And in many ways, I think you can reach more people that way. So we deal with a lot of kind of like getting past that head trash, as I like to call it, all of the junk in your head that is preventing you from recognizing that this is a valid, viable calling, that God gave you gifts, he gave you skills, he gave you desires and abilities in this realm, and that's a great thing. That's a fantastic thing. So we have, and then you also need to know, kind of like what I mentioned before. So you need to understand what it is that God created you to do, what your business should be, how it should kind of present itself to the world. But then you also need to know the practical things of exactly how do I do that? So how do I do a website? How do I do a mailing list? How do I do, so all of the practical walking it out so you can not just have this kind of spiritual, but also, okay, let's get our boots on and we're going to tromp through some mud to get there. So we have both of those things. We actually have on, it's supernaturalbiz.com. And we have, depending on, because we know there are a lot of people that they have been so blocked. They know they want to have a business. They know they're called to something. They have zero idea where to start. So we have one class, and we've changed the name. So I think it's, and I think we just titled it something real obvious and simple. What kind of business should I start? And so it's, I think there's 7 lessons there. It's a short class that you can take on our site that will help you kind of identify the things that God has placed in you to give you some ideas of what might that business be. So if you have a business idea, then we have the Supernatural Business Challenge, which is on our site. And that's what the book is. It's kind of this beginning piece. And that's where we address a lot of the head trash issues, kind of what is your business vision? What is your lifestyle vision? Those kind of spiritual and emotional. We don't deal as much with the practicalities in that. And it's a short book, short class. So short, but complex, I think. Highly
helpful. Because if you are a member of Dallas Holistic Health Group, you have seen some of these brilliant systems that came from Holy Spirit and really great counsel from Seneca and Alice. So,
and then we have a full class that then gets down into that we're calling the foundations of supernatural business growth. And that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of how to do that, but still staying true to what God is saying and tapping into the spiritual revelation of the ideas that God has for your business that may not be, exactly the same for everybody else. So.
Yeah. You also mentioned head trash. You have a course on how to take out your head trash. So where can people find you and the work that you do? How can they connect with you, Alice?
So I am all over the place. You can connect with the Supernatural Business classes at supernaturalbiz.com. And BIZ is the supernaturalbiz.com. You can connect with my inner healing practice is at emotionalandspiritualhealing.com. My art is at alicearlene.com. Arlene is my middle name. And my book design business is at kingdomcovers.com. So, and then the magazine that I mentioned earlier is indieauthormagazine.com. And my books are available pretty much wherever books are sold. So the ones I tend to have them, that most of them deal with, they're based on helping people do the thing that I do in my businesses. So I have links to them. Most of my books are on emotionalandspiritualhealing.com. I do have several art books with that story and my artwork and that kind of stuff. So, and those are listed on those respective sites, but they're also available wherever books are sold. So.
Perfect. And we'll put a link in the description if you just want to connect with her in one click. So Alice, thank you so much. I just love talking to you and learning and listening. So this has been super fun.
It has been. Thank you so much.
You're listening to Medicinal Minutes with Meagan Mozingo.